Her stolen kiss shattered his billion-dollar world, but her secret changed it all forever. The moment her lips touched his, everything shattered. Not just his composure, not just the steel fortress he'd built around his heart, but his billion-dollar empire, the world he had sworn no one could ever touch. Damian Black was a man who believed in control, every move calculated, every deal executed with precision. He was the kind of man who thought fate was a fairy tale for the weak. Until that night, until her, Isabel Hart, the woman with fire in her eyes and secrets she could never confess, the woman who shouldn't have been anywhere near him, yet somehow managed to step right into his carefully guarded world. It happened in a flash, a masquerade, a dance in the shadows, one reckless kiss, a kiss that burned through the lies they both wore and left behind nothing but danger. Because here's the truth, Isabel wasn't just a stranger who stole a billionaire's breath away. She was the journalist sworn to expose him, the woman who held the power to ruin him, and the one who might just destroy herself in the process. Two lives, two opposing worlds, bound together by passion, betrayal, and a secret so explosive it could tear them both apart. So tell me, what happens when the untouchable billionaire finds himself falling for the one woman who should have been his enemy? What happens when the kiss that began as a weapon becomes a promise neither of them can escape? Before we dive into this incredible story, I need to ask for your support. This video took over 40 hours to research, write, and produce. If you find value in these deep dive stories, please consider subscribing. It only takes a second, but it truly helps me keep creating content like this for you. Now, let's begin. Rain hammered against the glass walls of the penthouse like 1,000 tiny fists. Inside, the city lights burned beneath the storm, but Damian Black stood alone, untouched by it all. He was the kind of man who thrived in chaos, billion-dollar deals, ruthless rivals, boardroom battles. None of it ever shook him. But tonight was different. His pulse betrayed him. His thoughts betrayed him. And all because of her kiss. It shouldn't have mattered. One reckless touch at a masquerade ball, a night meant to celebrate another billion added to his empire. Yet that single kiss had pulled apart the seams of his perfectly ordered world. Damian clenched his jaw, staring out over Manhattan, replaying it in his mind. The soft press of lips, the spark that shouldn't have existed. The realization that for the first time in years, someone had slipped past the walls he'd built around his heart. And then, the truth. Her mask had fallen, not literally, but enough. Enough for him to know she wasn't who she pretended to be. Isabel Hart, a journalist, a woman with a mission, and he was the story she came to expose. He whispered her name like a curse. Isabel. To the world, Damian Black was untouchable, a titan forged from ambition, money, and cold precision. But to Isabel, he was a man with secrets, and she had the power to rip them out into the light. And still, he wanted her, the memory of her laugh, the way her eyes lingered just a second too long. That kiss, it was more than desire, it was danger. He paced the penthouse, fury and hunger clashing in his chest. This wasn't supposed to happen. He didn't believe in fate. He didn't believe in accidents. He made his own rules, his own destiny. So why had she undone him in a single night? The storm outside raged louder, as if echoing his own turmoil. Damian's reflection stared back at him in the glass. Sharp suit, sharp jaw, every inch the billionaire the world worshipped. Yet the eyes that stared back weren't steady. For once, they betrayed him. Isabel had cracked something inside him, and no amount of money, power, or control could undo it. Because she wasn't just a woman. She was tempted and betrayal wrapped into one. A mystery he couldn't solve, an enemy he couldn't resist. And now, whether he liked it or not, their stories were bound together. But here's the question. What happens when the untouchable finally meets the one person who can bring him down? What happens when the first kiss isn't just passion, but the spark of a war neither of them is ready to fight? Damian Black stood there, hand clenched against the glass, and made a silent vow. If she thought she could destroy him, she was wrong. But if he thought he could let her go, he was wrong too. The city outside roared, alive with thunder, alive with secrets. And in that storm, a love story was about to begin. One born from danger, obsession, and a kiss that should never have happened. So tell me, what would you do if you found yourself in Damian's position? Let me know in the comments below. Every empire has its foundation, and Damian Black's was built not on privilege, but on pain. Long before he was the man the world whispered about in boardrooms and glossy magazines, he was just a boy standing in the shadows of a crumbling apartment in South Brooklyn. Rain leaked through the cracked ceiling. His mother worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. His father, gone, swallowed by his own mistakes. Damian grew up learning one hard truth. No one was coming to save him, but instead of letting that truth break him, he carved it into armor. At 16, he hustled through odd jobs, stocking shelves, fixing engines, even running deliveries for businesses that barely paid him. He didn't complain. He observed every exchange, every deal, every careless mistake others made. He studied it like scripture. Opportunities don't wait for you, his mother once told him, exhausted but still fighting. You either build the door or you stay outside forever. Those words lodged deep in Damian's chest. So he built doors. By 21, he was negotiating contracts with men twice his age. By 25, he had launched his first company. Not inherited, not gifted, created. Piece by piece, deal by deal, fueled by a hunger that came from knowing what it was like to have nothing. But here's the irony. The higher he climbed, the lonelier the air became. Wealth gave him power, but it also drew vultures. People smiled too wide, praised too easily, and agreed too quickly. He saw through them all. It was why Damian wore his aloofness like another tailored suit. Sharp, impeccable, unreadable. Because behind those cold eyes was still the boy from South Brooklyn. Someone who couldn't afford to let anyone close enough to hurt him again. And yet, this guarded heart wasn't born from arrogance. It was born from survival, from nights when the fridge was empty, from promises he made to his mother's weary hands that she would never suffer again. That's what drove him. That's what made him relentless. And that's why control became his obsession. Because control meant safety. Control meant never going back to the shadows. But love was chaos, unpredictable, uncontrollable. It was a door he never dared to build. And that's what makes Isabel Hart's sudden appearance in his world so dangerous. Because she wasn't someone he could negotiate, predict, or dismiss. She was fire wrapped in vulnerability. And no matter how hard he tried, Damian couldn't treat her like just another contract. So now I ask you, do you think Damian's background justifies the walls he's built? Do you believe a man forged in hardship has the right to guard his heart this fiercely? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your take. Some encounters feel ordinary, and then there are the ones that split your life into before and after. For Damian Black, that moment arrived on a night wrapped in silk and shadows. A masquerade gala where power dressed itself in diamonds and every smile hid a secret. He wasn't there for pleasure. He never was. Events like this were simply extensions of the battlefield. Contracts disguised as champagne toasts, negotiations hidden behind polite laughter. And then he saw her. At first it was only a glimpse. A woman in a crimson mask, her presence cutting through the crowd like a spark in darkness. The room was loud, yet she carried herself as if the noise bent around her. She didn't belong to the chatter, the flattery, the desperate orbit of wealth. She moved as if she was searching for something else, something real. Damian told himself to look away. He didn't. Their paths collided at the edge of the ballroom, near a balcony framed by moonlight. She turned, and for the briefest second, their eyes locked. Blue steel met fire. "Enjoying the masquerade?" she asked softly, her voice a blend of curiosity and defiance. He almost smirked. "Depends. Are we talking about the party or the people in it?" Her lips curved, just enough to suggest she understood exactly what he meant. The world around them blurred. Music, laughter, even time itself seemed to step aside. It wasn't love at first sight. It was something sharper. recognition, as if two guarded souls had stumbled into a mirror they never expected to find. Damian wasn't used to being unsettled, yet here he was, leaning closer, drawn into a gravity he couldn't name. Her presence cracked the control he prized so much. Who was she? Why did she feel like both danger and salvation in the same breath? For Isabel Hart, the moment was no less electric. She had come to the gala with a purpose, a mission hidden beneath the elegance of her gown. Exposing Damian Black was supposed to be her story, the article that would prove her worth as a journalist. But standing there, staring into the eyes of the man she was meant to ruin, her resolve trembled. Because the man wasn't just headlines and rumors. He was flesh, shadow, and vulnerability cloaked in power. And with one glance, he became more than a target. He became a question she didn't know how to answer. The balcony air grew cooler, sharper, yet neither of them moved away. It was reckless. It was irrational. It was undeniable. One dance followed, then another. Not because of the music, but because neither could let go of the thread binding them together. And with each step, the walls Damian built began to fracture. With each laugh Isabel allowed herself, her mission began to blur. They didn't know it yet, but the kiss that would later set everything ablaze began here, in the silence between words, in the gaze neither dared to break. So let me ask you, have you ever felt an instant connection like this? That spark you can't explain, but you know it means something? Tell us about it in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. Every secret has a shadow, and the deeper Damian and Isabel fell into each other's orbit, the longer those shadows stretched. What began as a chance encounter at a masquerade didn't end there. It grew. Quiet dinners and tucked-away restaurants, late-night phone calls that lingered past reason, moments stolen between obligations, each one a spark feeding into something neither wanted to name. Damian, the man who had sworn love was a weakness, found himself searching for excuses just to hear her voice. And Isabel, who had promised herself this was just research, couldn't stop her heart from racing each time his name lit up her phone. But beneath the warmth of laughter, tension hummed like a live wire, because both carried secrets sharp enough to cut. One evening, as the city glowed beneath them, Damian invited Isabel into his world, a sleek rooftop, private, silent except for the hum of traffic far below. He poured 2 glasses of wine, his expression unreadable. "You don't trust easily," Isabel said, studying him. "And you do," he countered, raising a brow. A smile flickered across her face. Fair point. But what she didn't say, the truth, was heavier than any glass between them. She wasn't just the woman enchanted by the billionaire. She was the journalist digging for his flaws, the one carrying a recorder hidden in her purse, the one who knew that every word he spoke could end him. And yet, she hesitated to press the button. Why? Because the man sitting across from her wasn't just a headline anymore. He was flesh, complexity, vulnerability. He was the guarded boy who had clawed his way out of nothing. And with every secret he let slip, every rare smile he offered, Isabel's resolve wavered. Still, the deception lingered like a shadow she couldn't shake. "Sometimes," Damian said quietly, "I wonder what it would be like to be seen. Not as Damian Black, not as the Empire, just me." The words pierced her, because wasn't that exactly what she had wanted? To strip him down to truth? And yet hearing it from him, raw, unguarded, made her want to protect him, not expose him. It was a dangerous contradiction. The closer she got, the more impossible the choice became. Was she falling for him or for the story? And Damian, though unaware of her secret, felt the tension too. There was something about Isabel, something unsaid, something just out of reach. He sensed it in the way her smile sometimes faltered, in the way her gaze lingered when she thought he wasn't looking. And though he didn't know what she was hiding, part of him feared it, because control was his armor, and Isabel had found the cracks. One night the tension finally snapped. They were walking along the river, the city lights rippling across the water. Damian stopped, his voice low, steady. "You're not telling me everything." Her heart jolted. "What makes you say that?" He held her gaze unflinching. "Instinct. and instinct has never failed me. For a breathless moment, Isabel considered confessing everything. The article, the investigation, the betrayal waiting to happen. But then, she didn't. Instead, she whispered, "Maybe some truths take time." He searched her eyes, torn between suspicion and desire. And then, without another word, he kissed her. Not reckless this time, not a masquerade mistake, but deliberate, intentional. The kind of kiss that said, "I'm choosing to trust you, even if I shouldn't." For Isabel, it was both salvation and punishment, because with every lie she buried, the story inside her notebook became more dangerous, and the love in her chest grew harder to deny. That was the paradox of their bond. Every step closer pulled them deeper into something real, but every heartbeat carried them closer to the explosion waiting in the shadows. So here's the question for you. Is it ever okay to hide your true identity in a relationship? What's your opinion? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to see where you stand, because for Damian and Isabel, the answer wasn't simple, and soon the cost of their secrets would demand to be paid. Every love story is tested. For Damian and Isabel, that test came from the one place Damian could never fully escape, his family. On the surface, the Blacks were royalty in the business world, powerful, untouchable. But beneath the polished smiles and glossy magazine covers, the family was a battlefield. And Damian, despite all his success, was still their favorite target. His father, Richard Black, believed weakness was a crime. Affection, loyalty, compassion, all liabilities in his eyes. And to him, Isabel was the embodiment of weakness. "You can't afford distractions," Richard snapped one night during a private dinner. Damian kept his jaw tight, his hands still, but his eyes burned. "She's not a distraction. She's nothing, a liability, and liabilities don't belong in this family." That single word, nothing, was like a blade. Isabel wasn't even there to defend herself, and yet she was the weapon his father chose to wield. The pressure didn't stop with Richard. Damian's sister, elegant and cruel in equal measure, cornered him at a gala. Her smile was sweet, her words were poison. "Tell me, brother, do you really think she loves you? Or the empire attached to your name?" Damian brushed past her, but her question followed him like a shadow. It struck at the core of his deepest fear. Because Isabel did have secrets, secrets she hadn't confessed. And though he didn't know what they were, his family's whispers fanned the fire of doubt. Isabel, on the other hand, felt the tension closing in. Damian's world wasn't built for outsiders, especially not ones like her. At every event, she could feel the stares, the unspoken judgment, the polite smiles that carried knives behind them. She tried to ignore it. She tried to stand tall. But late at night, when Damian's phone lit up with yet another cold message from his father, Isabel began to wonder if love was strong enough to shield them. One evening, Damian found her sitting by the window, her face lit only by the city lights. "You're quiet tonight," he said. She hesitated, then whispered, "Maybe your family's right. Maybe I don't belong in your world." His response was sharp, immediate. "Don't say that. But it's true, isn't it? Look at me. Look at them. I'm just—" He cut her off, his voice breaking with something rare, pleading. "You're everything they'll never be, and that's why they hate you." The words hung between them, raw, exposed. For a moment, Isabel saw the boy inside the man, the one who had grown up under the weight of impossible expectations, fighting for air. And she realized this was more than love. It was war. A war Damian had been fighting his entire life, and one she was now caught in the middle of. But here's the truth about toxic families. They don't just attack the person you are. They attack the person you could become. And Damian's father had no intention of letting his son become the man he wanted to be, especially if Isabel was part of that future. That set the stage for the greatest conflict yet, because love is powerful, yes. But what happens when love collides with blood, legacy, and the relentless weight of family expectation? So let me ask you, how far would you go to protect someone you love from toxic family members? Would you fight back, walk away, or sacrifice the relationship altogether? Comment below. I really want to hear your thoughts, because for Damian and Isabel, the next choice they made would change everything. Every love story has secrets, but sometimes those secrets are so dangerous, you can't just wait for the truth to surface. You have to dig for it, and that's exactly what Damian did. On the outside, nothing had changed. He and Isabel still laughed together. They still shared those quiet moments of tenderness when the rest of the world faded away. But underneath, doubt gnawed at him like a slow poison. His father's words echoed in his head. She's a liability. She's nothing. And his sister's cruel smile replayed on a loop. Does she love you or the empire? Damian wanted to ignore them. He wanted to believe Isabel completely. But then little cracks started to show. Phone calls she silenced the moment he walked into the room. Late nights where she claimed to be out with a friend, but never gave names. A letter he caught her folding quickly, sliding into her purse before he could see the handwriting. They weren't damning proofs, but they were enough to stir suspicion. And once suspicion plants itself in your heart, it grows like ivy, clinging, twisting, choking. So Damian did something he'd never imagined doing to the woman he loved. He went undercover, not in the dramatic movie sense with disguises and fake names, but in the subtle ways, watching closely, listening more than speaking, piecing together the puzzle of Isabel's unexplained absences. One night he followed her. She left their apartment dressed plainly, her hair tucked into a scarf, moving with a nervous edge. Damian trailed her from a distance, every step laced with guilt. What was he doing? Spying on her? Yet the other voice in his head, the voice that had been trained by years of his father's paranoia, kept pushing him forward. Isabel ducked into a small cafe on the east side of the city. Damian slipped inside moments later, sitting in the shadows where she couldn't see him, and that's when he saw it. Isabel wasn't alone. Across from her sat a man in his early 40s, sharp suit, cold eyes, the kind of presence that commanded attention without a word. The two spoke in hushed tones, Isabel's face tense, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. Damian couldn't hear the words, but the body language was clear. This wasn't casual. This was serious. And it wasn't the first time they'd met. He could tell by the ease with which they leaned in, like two people who shared a history. When Isabel reached across the table and slid him an envelope, Damian's chest tightened. Money? Documents? Something else? Whatever it was, it confirmed his worst fear. Isabel was hiding something monumental. He left before she could notice him, his mind racing, his heart heavier than it had ever been. Back in his car, he sat in silence, staring at the steering wheel. She's lying to me, he whispered to himself. But then another thought crept in. Or was she protecting him? That's the cruel part about secrets. You never know if they're meant to shield you or destroy you. For days, Damian kept his discovery to himself. Every time Isabel smiled at him, every time she leaned her head against his shoulder, he wondered, how much of this is real? How much of this is performance? His growing paranoia bled into their conversations. He became sharper, colder, his words laced with a suspicion he couldn't hide. One night, Isabel finally confronted him. You're different, she said softly. You don't look at me the same. What's going on, Damian? He froze. The truth clawed at his throat. Should he tell her he'd been following her? That he'd seen her hand over that envelope? But he swallowed it down. Instead, he lied. Nothing. I'm just tired. Isabel studied him, her eyes searching for cracks in his mask. For a moment, he thought she saw right through him, but then she nodded slowly and let it drop. Yet Damian knew it wouldn't stay buried. Not forever, because the truth has a way of clawing to the surface, no matter how deep you try to push it down. And the deeper his suspicions grew, the more dangerous the fallout would become when Isabel's secrets finally came to light. So let me ask you, do you think spying on someone you love is ever justified? Would you follow them, like Damian did, or would you wait for the truth to reveal itself? Let me know your stance in the comments below. Because for Damian, that choice had already been made, and it was leading him toward a revelation that would shatter everything he thought he knew about the woman he loved. Every secret eventually claws its way into the light, and for Damian and Isabel, that moment came faster and sharper than either of them expected. It started with a single slip. Isabel left her purse on the counter one evening, distracted as she rushed to the stove to stir their dinner. Damian never meant to look, but his eyes caught on the edge of an envelope, half peeking out. The same kind of envelope she had passed to that man in the cafe. His hands moved before his conscience could stop him. He pulled it free, heart hammering, and unfolded the contents. Inside were photographs, not of strangers, but of him. Damian, snapshots of him leaving his father's estate, standing at the boardroom doors, even one of him asleep on their couch. Each photo was marked with handwritten notes in the margins, times, dates, and coded initials he couldn't decipher. His blood ran cold. The woman he loved had been tracking him, documenting him, like prey. The sound of Isabel's voice broke his trance. "What are you doing?" Damian spun. Isabel stood in the doorway, eyes wide, face drained of color as she realized what he held. "Explain this," Damian said. His voice wasn't raised, but it carried the weight of a storm. Isabel stepped forward, shaking her head. "It's not what it looks like." "Then tell me," he snapped. "Tell me why the woman I love has been spying on me like I'm some stranger." For a heartbeat, Isabel said nothing. Her lips trembled, her eyes flickered with panic. Then finally the truth spilled out. She wasn't who she claimed to be. The man in the cafe? He wasn't a lover or even a friend. He was her handler. Isabel had been placed in Damian's life deliberately, tasked with gathering information on his family's empire. The shady deals, the corruption, the money that flowed in the shadows. She admitted she'd started the job without hesitation. To her, it was just another assignment. But then, she fell for him, and that was the one thing she hadn't planned. Damian stood frozen, his chest heaving. "So, all of it," he whispered. "The laughter, the nights we stayed up until dawn, the way you looked at me. Was it all fake?" "No," Isabel cried, her voice cracking. "I never expected to love you, Damian, but I do. Everything I felt for you, every moment, was real. Please believe that." He shook his head, tears stinging his eyes, anger warring with heartbreak. "How am I supposed to believe anything you say now? How do I know you're not just playing me to get closer to my family?" Isabel's voice dropped, trembling but steady. "Because I chose you over them. I stopped sending reports weeks ago. That's why they've been pressing me. That's why I'm terrified, Damian. Walking away from them isn't easy. They don't let people just leave." Silence hung heavy in the room. Damian stared at her, the woman he thought he knew, the woman who had just torn open the foundation of his trust. Finally he spoke, his words quiet but sharp. "You should have told me. If you really loved me, you would have trusted me with the truth." "And risk losing you?" Isabel whispered. "You would have walked away the second I confessed. I was scared. I couldn't." "Couldn't or wouldn't?" Damian cut her off. The tension snapped like a whip. Both of them were raw, stripped to the bone by secrets neither could run from anymore. Isabel's tears spilled freely. She stepped closer, reaching for his hand. "I was wrong. I should have trusted you. But please don't doubt what's in my heart. You mean more to me than any mission, any handler, any threat they could make." Damian pulled his hand back, his jaw tight. "Love built on lies doesn't last, Isabel. You've left me with nothing but doubt." For the first time she flinched, not from anger, but from the weight of knowing she might have just lost the only person who made her betrayal bearable. The air between them burned with unspoken words. Love and betrayal coiled together like venom in their veins. "And here's where I'll turn it to you. Who do you think was more wrong in this situation? Damian, for spying and confronting without giving her the chance to explain first? Or Isabel for bearing the truth until it exploded in the worst possible way? Defend your choice in the comments. I want to know where you stand. Because one thing's for certain, from this point forward, nothing between them would ever be the same. Some wounds don't bleed on the surface. They live inside, quiet, invisible, but they ache with every breath. That's where Damian found himself after Isabel's confession. The room was silent, but his mind screamed. Every memory of their time together replayed, tainted now with doubt. The first kiss, the shared laughter, even the way she whispered his name in the dark. Suddenly it all felt scripted. He couldn't sit still. Damian stormed out of the apartment, her voice chasing after him. "Please, don't go!" The night air hit him hard, cool against the heat of his anger. He kept walking, fists clenched until the city lights blurred in his vision. He didn't know where he was going. He just knew he couldn't breathe in the same room with her lies. Hours passed. He ended up on the edge of the river, staring at the black water rolling beneath the bridge. The current carried everything forward and never looked back. His father's words echoed in his mind. "Trust is everything, son. Lose that, and you have nothing." And now, that's exactly what he felt. Nothing. But beneath the numbness, something else stirred. Love. Stubborn, relentless love. Because even in her betrayal, Isabel's tears had been real. Her voice had cracked in a way no actor could fake. She chose him over her mission. Didn't that mean something? Damian pressed his palms to his face, groaning. Why does my heart still want her? Back at the apartment, Isabel sat alone, knees pulled to her chest. Her phone buzzed again and again, unread messages from her handler, each one sharper than the last. Where are the files? Why the delay? Don't make us come looking for you. She ignored them all. Instead, she stared at the door, praying Damian would walk back through it. Her heart whispered the same plea on repeat. Come back, please come back. But hours later, the lock never turned. The next morning, Damian found himself sitting in a cafe, untouched coffee cooling by his hand. He kept staring at the steam fading into the air. Fading, just like the future he thought he had with her. The barista asked softly, Rough night? He gave a humorless laugh. You could say that. Her simple kindness made him pause. Sometimes strangers saw us more clearly than those closest to us. And maybe, just maybe, love meant more than flawless trust. Maybe it meant forgiveness, too. He left without drinking his coffee, but his steps carried him home. Not because he had forgiven her, but because he couldn't bear to leave things unfinished. When he walked through the door, Isabel shot up from the couch, eyes red, face pale. Damian, her voice cracked like broken glass. He held up a hand. Don't. Not yet. The silence was heavier than before, but it wasn't empty. It was filled with questions neither dared to voice. Finally, Damian spoke. I don't know if I can forgive you. Not today, maybe not ever, but I can't pretend my heart doesn't still want you. That's the part I hate most. Tears slid down Isabel's cheeks. I'll wait. As long as it takes. I'll prove to you that I'm more than the lies I told. He looked at her then, really looked, broken, beautiful, desperate, and for the first time since the truth came out, Damian felt the weight shift inside him. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a fragile thread of possibility. Because love and betrayal aren't opposites. Sometimes they live side by side. And now I'll ask you, could you forgive someone who deceived you like this, even if their intentions were good? Tell me why or why not in the comments, because the line between love and betrayal is thinner than any of us want to admit. Some endings don't arrive with fireworks. They come quietly, like the first light after a storm. Damian woke up to the smell of coffee. Isabel was in the kitchen moving slowly, her hands trembling as she poured a cup. The silence between them had stretched for days, heavy but unbroken. Yet here she was, making coffee as if that small act could stitch them back together. He sat at the table watching her. His voice was low, tired. You don't have to pretend everything's normal. She set the cup down in front of him, not meeting his eyes. I'm not pretending. I just don't know where to start. Damian stared at the steam rising between them. For the first time, he didn't feel only anger. He felt the ache of what they could lose if neither of them reached across that space. Finally, he whispered, Then start with the truth. All of it. And she did. Isabel told him everything. The mission, the pressure from her family, the fear that if she disobeyed, they'd destroy her life or his. Her words spilled out, not polished or rehearsed, but raw. When she finished, tears blurred her vision. I chose you, Damian. I risked everything for you. But I know that doesn't erase the lies. He sat in silence, the weight of her confession pressing against his chest. A week ago, he would have walked away, but something inside him had shifted. Maybe love wasn't about perfection. Maybe it was about surviving the cracks together. Slowly, he reached across the table, covering her hand with his. I can't forget what you did, but I see who you are now. And maybe that's enough. Her breath caught, and for the first time in days, she let herself hope. The days that followed weren't easy. Trust didn't return overnight. Damian still hesitated when her phone buzzed. Isabel still flinched when he asked where she was going. But instead of avoiding those moments, they faced them. Head on. He told her his fears. She admitted her guilt. And in those small, fragile exchanges, something new grew between them. Not the blind trust they once had, but something sturdier, honest, hard-won. One night they walked by the river where Damian had once stood alone. The city lights shimmered across the water. This time, he wasn't running from her. He was beside her. Isabel stopped, looking at him with uncertainty. Do you really think we can make this work? He turned, studying her face in the glow of the street lamp. I don't know, but I know I want to try, and that has to mean something. Her lips curved into the faintest smile, soft and real. In that moment, it wasn't about the past or the lies or even the pain. It was about choice, choosing to move forward even when it was easier to let go. Because reconciliation isn't magic, it's work. It's showing up again and again when walking away would be simpler. And for Damian and Isabel, that choice was the truest proof of love. Now let me ask you, what's the most important quality in a relationship? Love, trust, or honesty? Share your thoughts in the comments. Because at the end of the day, every relationship comes down to what we're willing to fight for. Some stories don't end with grand gestures. They end with quiet choices, the kind that change everything. Months later, Damian and Isabel sat on the same park bench where their story had first taken a turn. The air was warm, alive with the hum of spring. Children laughed in the distance. Life had moved on, but so had they. Damian glanced at her, a hint of hesitation still in his eyes. You know, he said softly, I used to wonder if we'd ever find peace after all that happened. Isabel turned toward him. No disguise, no secrets, just her. And now? He smiled faintly. Now I think peace isn't something you find. It's something you build. That simple line carried more weight than promises ever could, because they both knew trust would always be fragile, but love had taught them how to hold it carefully. Their days weren't perfect. Arguments still sparked. Doubt still knocked at the door now and then. But instead of breaking them apart, those challenges became reminders. This love was real because it survived the fire. One evening, they walked hand in hand past the old streets where everything began. Isabel paused, her voice steady but vulnerable. Would you do it all again, knowing what we went through? Damian didn't hesitate. Yes, because it led me here, to you, and that's enough. The words weren't dramatic. They weren't dressed in poetry, but Isabel's smile said everything. After all the chaos, the lies, the revelations, what remained was choice. Choice to stay, choice to forgive, choice to begin again. And that's the heart of this story. Love isn't a perfect shield. It doesn't erase betrayal or magically silence fear. But when two people choose each other, again and again, even through the storm, that's where love becomes stronger than any obstacle. So now I'll leave the question with you. What did you think of this story? Do you believe in love conquering all obstacles? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories like this one. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply finding your way back to love.